To start off with, something simple. What is your job or career?
Sounds good, and maybe I'll introduce myself too, depending on how you all want to cut the footage.
Yeah,
But
that sounds good.
my name is Ryan LAEMEL. I am Amity class of 2010, and I am also Yale class of 2014. I'm 29 years old. I live in Basalt, Colorado, and I focus on sustainability and clean energy for my career. I've been spending about 6 years so far in this field. I worked at a clean energy nonprofit called RMI, which formerly used to be known as the Rocky Mountain Institute. And what we do is we consult with governments as well as businesses on the clean energy transition. That focuses on shifting to renewable energy, to electric vehicles, to efficient buildings. And specifically in my job, I focus on the country of India and work with government officials there, businesses, on how they can switch to electric vehicles.
Wow, so you're working a lot with like helping to make the environment better and cleaning, making the world a better place.
Exactly. I would say we have very mission-driven work at our organization, but I think regardless of what people's motivations are for the work that we do, that could be, about reducing local air pollution. It could also be about reducing the cost of foreign oil imports for a government. So regardless of someone's beliefs or motivations, I think there is now an economic case to do the type of work that we do, where it actually makes more financial sense to deploy solar and wind than it does a conventional coal power plant. Or it actually makes more economic sense for some type of operators of transportation systems to switch to electric vehicles like an electric bus.
That's awesome. So across all facets, that just sounds great. And how long have
Yeah,
you
it's
been
very
working in
fun.
this field?
Yeah, I've been working in this field for 6 years. I started in the field after I left college. I studied geology and geophysics, which was a great foundation in science for the work that I do today, and also has some aspects of math and quantitative analysis that I use in my job on a daily basis if we're trying to understand how cost effective might this particular solution be, or should I decide to invest in a set of batteries in solar panels, or should I go for another type of system? So that training in the sciences really helped. After that, I worked at Yale University for a while, very close to all of you in Woodbridge, and I focused on campus sustainability efforts for the university. We were largely focused on initiatives related to reducing the university's waste as well as its greenhouse gas emissions. There I got to work on a very interesting project known as a tax or a price on carbon emissions that were coming from the campus's buildings. We were actually the first university in the US to try that project out, and it's now operational in about 300 buildings on campus. And then since then, I relocated to Colorado where I work at RMI. I've been at RMI for about 4 years now, and I've worked on energy policy and consulting for a number of countries at this point.
Wow. So you like stepped up from university level and now you're like working whole countries. That's impressive.
Yeah, I think the university was a great opportunity to test some of the policy instruments that we want to see happening at the state level, at the national level, even internationally. And I learned a lot from having a really committed group of people to work with, and also from having that space to experiment with a solution.
Wow, that's awesome. And is this different from what you were thinking you wanted to go into in high school? Like, were your career goals, did you know right away this was where you wanted to go, or were you maybe wavering between ideas for career paths?
It's a great question. I was the MA class of 2010, and honestly, I had a lot of trouble deciding on my career goal and my career trajectory. I originally, like leaving my senior year, I think I had decided on becoming a medical professional. And I think on my first day of classes at university, I decided that I was going to abandon that career goal. Um, and I think it took a lot of thinking about like what was my internal personal motivator for the work that I do. And I think I realized that my motivation wasn't necessarily the field that I was in, although that might be the case for some people. But it was actually just helping people, solving complicated problems, and ultimately protecting the environment. And that is what led me to work on sustainability and energy issues like I do today. And I think for all of you, I would encourage you to dedicate time to understand your motivators. It's easy to say that I want to work in a particular field. It's much harder to say what motivates me to wake up every day. What problems do I want to solve overall? Or even what do I find rewarding and can I imagine myself spending 8 or more hours a day working on?
That's actually so helpful right now because I'm doing like the whole college search thing, like the junior year. So thank you. That's some great advice. Were there any subjects in high school that really led you to this? Or obviously, since you were thinking of becoming a medical or going into the medical field, was there any subjects in high school that really sent you in that direction?
Yeah, I would say, because I was interested in medicine back then, I was definitely more drawn to the sciences. Uh, but I can also say by the time I got to university, I ended up taking a lot of courses in English and social sciences. Today, I still find that those courses that I took in high school as well as in college across a variety of subjects was very beneficial. In terms of specific classes, I really benefited from courses in chemistry and physics. I found that it helped me think from first principles. So if we're trying to think about how could we create a cheaper battery for electric vehicles, the first idea you might start to think about is, well, what are the main ingredients of a battery? And then start understanding how can I reduce the cost of each of those materials. It also helped me think from a hypothesis-driven approach, which can really help save time in your job. So if I need to go to a policymaker and make a set of recommendations about what they might do for electric vehicles, rather than starting from zero, I can start with a hypothesis of this state may need to incentivize these types of vehicles by a certain amount. And I can then propose that to the policymaker and get their feedback, and it saves us a lot of time. So chemistry and physics really helped me think from first principles and use a hypothesis-driven approach. I think some other ones that are less familiar or normal for my type of career in the STEM field were, a class that I took on Excel. We use a lot of quantitative analysis in the work that I do to understand how economic a particular energy system might be, to understand what the carbon emission savings of a particular technology might be. And knowing 10 Excel functions is powerful. And knowing 20 is even more powerful. And I'm seeing today that like statistics and computer programming are actually making that work faster, more efficient, and more able to be done at scale. So, if I could go back 10 years ago now, I would probably take those courses if they were offered to me. The last point I'll make is like, I think English and psychology were also very important for the work that I do. I've risen through the ranks of my organizations that I work at, and it's put me in a position where I need to lead teams and where I also need to communicate with our clients. And being able to persuade someone why you're making a particular recommendation is really important. Being able to think out loud, work out loud in a coherent way is also very important. And also just understanding different people's personalities and what motivates them. and what incentives you might put in place to reward someone or to reward a policymaker or an adopter of a particular technology. So, to me, those 4 areas were really beneficial during my time in high school. I also ran cross country and track. And I have to say, I wouldn't be the disciplined person that I am today without going through that and contributing to those teams. I still wake up and run most days. And I think what running really taught me is that small daily choices can add up to a major life milestone. So it's really hard to put your shoes on some days and go outside and run those 3 miles. But if you think about doing that over a year, or 5 years, or 10 years, imagine how far you can run and imagine how much faster you can get running. And I see that also applying in all of our careers.
So you really employed everything that you learned in high school and took it over. That's amazing, honestly. The running does.
I wouldn't say I deployed everything. I know I forgot a lot of things, specific subjects that we might have learned or specific, uh, you know, elements of math or science, whatever it might have been. But I think making sure that you're continuing to learn on an annual basis is very important. Our founder, his name's Amory Levins, he's an expert internationally on energy efficiency and renewable energy. And his rule of thumb is that you need to learn one new subject or one new skill every year. And you don't have to learn it to a degree of perfection. You just have to know enough about it to apply it in your work. And so for me, I'm learning a lot about finance this year because I've been realizing that, as I work on electric vehicle adoption, we all know that they're expensive. We all know that we don't have a lot of charging infrastructure for them. But what I've come to realize is it's actually very hard to get a loan for electric vehicles. And so I want to learn more about how I can apply skills in finance to help people finance their electric vehicle the same way you would have a mortgage for a house.
Wow, that's awesome. Is that like a thing common to all of your, like all the other employees that work with you? Do you all have to like learn a new skill?
It's not a company requirement, but it's definitely encouraged. And, in my workplace, we have funding that supports our professional development on an annual basis. So we can use that to take classes, to attend workshops, to give presentations at conferences. And it's a great way to grow as a professional.
Wow, that's great. Are there any special like teachers or coaches or just mentors in your life that have really brought you to this point?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's hard to name anyone in particular because I really feel like so many people have helped me get to the point where I am today. I think when I think back to high school, I really found my cross country coach to be an incredible example of discipline and a great example of effective leadership and organization. And a lot of the discipline that I learned from him and a lot of the organizational skills, motivation tactics that we use to get the team to go out for runs every day are strategies that I use today to motivate a project team that I'm working on where maybe there's 4 or 5 people trying to consult with the city government on how they can change their strategy for transportation. So I think you can learn from everyone, and it's really important to remember that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So can you tell me a little bit about an average day in your job? I know that you start off your morning with a nice run, and then when you're at work, what do you do there?
Yeah, sure. I definitely start off most mornings with a run. I think it's really important to try to start the day with something vigorous and to accomplish something when you roll out of bed. For us, a lot of the work that I do focuses on research, on projects with governments, and on workshops that we host with governments to try to inform the design of policies. So because I work with India, uh, maybe I'll start this over actually. um, I think so. A lot of the work that we do is around research projects and workshops. And I work with officials as well as industry players in India. And we actually have half of our team at my organization for our India program over in Delhi. So my day actually starts quite early and sometimes it ends quite late because I need to sync up with the people who work in those geographies. So sometimes I might be on a call at 5 or 6 in the morning, and sometimes I might actually be on a call at 11, 12, or even 1 sometimes. And I plan my day flexibly to accommodate for that. So, sometimes I might take a run in the middle of the day if I know I'm going to have an hour or two of late night calls. Typically, I start my day around 7 or 8. I plan the day to figure out what I need to accomplish this week and what I need to get done today in particular. I'll usually start the day with some early morning calls to get up to speed on what our team's been working on in Delhi. I'll then spend a few very focused hours with my head down on research and writing. So I'll look into reports that I might need to reference. I'll consider some interview notes that we had from the previous few days, and I'll try to turn that into a synthesis or a set of recommendations that we can give to whoever our client is, so they can actually do something with that, like make a business decision or inform a policy design. I'll break for lunch always. I think it's really important to take a break from your work and go for a walk too if you have time. I'll spend another hour or two probably after that on team and program management. I do a lot of budgeting for our program, a lot of fundraising for our program, and a lot of coaching for the staff that we have on our team. So making sure that I dedicate time to that every day is really important to make sure our team and our program grow. And yeah, after that, like I'll usually have one call in the evening and call it, but I have a lot of time still to travel, to get outside, and I think having a work-life balance is different for each person. Some people find that work-life balance to be more work, some find it to be less work, but I think ultimately each job will and each person will find the right balance for themselves. When I'm traveling, it can be a lot different. We can have some very long days, some meeting-filled days, running around a capital city of India like Delhi. And those days I find very energizing. Um, an average day, especially during the pandemic, like where there's a lot of video calls in a row, as someone who's very motivated by people, those can be more challenging days. But I think it's important to remember that you're still making that small progress toward the goals that you have laid out for yourself and for your organization.
Definitely. Before the pandemic, did you travel to India a lot, or were you mostly doing calls from there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was traveling to India about 6 to 8 times per year before the pandemic. And I would stay for anywhere from a week to 4 weeks, and typically would visit a variety of places. Um, a lot of our work focuses in the national capital territory of Delhi, where we'll meet with central government policymakers, uh, as well as business players to help inform the country's strategy for clean electricity, clean transportation, and clean building systems. Sometimes I'll also travel to cities and states. So we work with a few cities and states in India. Some of them are very large in size. For example, one of the cities I work with has 5 million people in its population, which, compared to the US is a large city, right? There's only a few cities of that size, and some states are, even much larger than California, which can be hard to believe. So, with over 1 billion people there, there's a lot of potential for this type of mission-driven work. And, it's my belief that India will be, and already is, one of the strongest economic powers in the world. And the decisions that it makes around technology adoption will ultimately influence what we do here in the US.
Yeah, wow. So did not being able to travel there, I bet that was a big,
Yeah, it's been challenging, but we've figured out ways to adapt. We used to do a lot of convening work, meaning we would bring different groups of people together with diverse perspectives. So maybe someone from industry, someone from the government, someone from civil society, someone who works on architecture or whatever the subject might be. We would bring those diverse perspectives together, meet in person, and work on a strategy for implementing maybe a pilot project. For example, how could we pilot 10 electric buses in this city? Now we can't do that in person, of course, so we switched a lot of this to Zoom. It's worked pretty effectively. Working on strategies has worked really well on Zoom. I think working on these pilot projects is more difficult because you can't actually visit the site where you might be launching that pilot project. But we definitely found ways to continue our impact, and we've shifted to a lot more calls. We're writing more research reports, and I think that's allowing us to continue to drive impact, even though we're not able to get over there. But
yeah.
I'm hopeful sometime later this year we'll be able to get over it.
Yeah, I think we're all very hopeful for that, just when everything gets back to normal. Um, what would you what would you consider your favorite part of like your work day and your job? I know you said you like being with people, so like what part of your work day is just your favorite?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think I really enjoy solving complex problems. And for us, what that might look like is, we want to build a national strategy for how to remove or reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation of goods in the country. So think about rail networks, think about UPS type of trucks that are traveling around. If we wanted to build that national strategy for a country of 1 billion people, that's growing, at 8% per year in terms of its GDP. That's a really complicated question. You're going to have to think about a lot of different variables, like do we want to build out the rail network, or do we want to improve the efficiency of the vehicles that we're using, or do we want to stack boxes in trucks more efficiently and make sure that a truck that goes from point A to point B and back carries goods from on the way there and on the way back, that it doesn't actually come back without any goods. So those types of problems are really difficult to solve. And I find we have to bring in a lot of different perspectives to solve them. And I really enjoy when I can get that group of people in the room. They can understand their differences. They can also understand the solutions that each of them can offer. And they start to figure out how their individual pieces of the puzzle can fit together and add up to something much greater. Our founder often calls this expanding the perimeter of the problem. If you can bring more perspectives in, you can actually understand the problem in more detail, and you can come up with a much more robust solution. So I get a lot of energy from convening those groups of people, facilitating them, and helping them drive towards an aligned vision for what that decarbonization strategy is going to look like, and then working with them to actually do it and making sure each person is moving along the roadmap that we created.
So you're like the collaboration master. You keep everyone in check, make it all happen.
I try. It's hard. It's sometimes like herding cats, as we like to say. Um, but and sometimes it can be like building an airplane while you're flying the airplane, right? You have to kind of adapt as you're going and learn as you're going, and so it's not like we have one of these workshops and call it done. It's a very cyclical process. We come back to it, we reevaluate, And I really enjoy that process of bringing those people together and holding us accountable to what we committed to.
Nice. And then on the flip side, what would you say is your least favorite part of your job?
Yeah, I think that is a hard question. I really enjoy the work that I do. I think where I struggle personally is that a small group of people can only accomplish so much in a large system. For example, if you're thinking about trying to change the electricity system in the US, there's billions of dollars of infrastructure that you have to influence. There's financial corporations you have to influence, policymakers you have to influence, regulators. And so being a 200, 300 person organization like we are means you do have a lot of people, but you have to make sure you're very careful about how they use their time and what they work on. And I think the challenging part of it for me is how do you find the right leverage point or the right acupuncture point to make sure that the small amount of force that you're going to apply to the system with your people can make the biggest difference possible. And that requires a lot of thinking, uh, a lot of research, and also an ability to let go at sometimes and say, okay, we're doing as much as we can. And some of these things, like something being approved, are out of our control. And we will continue pushing on our lever, and hopefully we'll try to even recruit some other people to push on other levers so we can collectively have more force on the system. But I think recognizing that you can only do so much is really important.
Yeah, especially in a career path like yours where it's a growing problem and it's such a big problem. I'm sure that can be very frustrating, but it takes a lot of patience, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think a lot of patience and a lot of willingness to accept that what you're doing is working and that you just have to keep working at it. And that these big types of transformations take a lot of time, a lot of resources, and the best thing you can do is keep at it.
The determination coming back from cross country. What would you tell a high school student who's looking to go into this field?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think if we look at sustainability and energy holistically, it's a broad field. I'm involved on the think tank and nonprofit side of that, where we're advising business strategies and policies. But there's a lot of other opportunities. For example, you could be involved in manufacturing of battery cells. You could be involved in the installation of solar panels on people's homes. You could finance a loan that someone uses to install charging infrastructure at their workplace. There's a lot of options in the clean energy space right now. It's growing quickly. And I think to get involved with it, it depends on where you want to go. I think if you want to be on the nonprofit and think tank side, like I am, really investing in your problem solving skills, your analytical skills, and your writing and communication skills will be very important. You don't have to be an engineer, you don't have to be a scientist. You can be a generalist across a lot of different subjects, but ultimately you have to have those core skills and then the intellectual curiosity to really want to understand these challenges in detail so that you can propose viable solutions. I think if you want to be on the manufacturing or installation side of this, there's a lot of really interesting skilling programs right now at the state level. There's great trade associations and trade schools that can teach you some of these skills. I think those are only going to be growing in the future. They're very quality jobs. They pay well, and they have a really solid mission beneath them as well. So I think those are really exciting jobs too. Um, and I think on the finance side, someone would have to learn the basics of banking and personal finance in order to get involved in that part of the equation. There are so many other ways to get involved in the clean energy transition. And I think most importantly, having a passion is the most important thing, whether it's for clean energy or another subject that you are interested in. My thesis advisor when I was at university once asked me a really great question, and he said, "Does this keep you up at night?" And I said, "It really doesn't, actually." um, and that's when I realized that geology and geophysics, which is what I was studying at the time, wasn't actually for me. I learned a lot from it, and I still apply a lot of what I learned to my job today. But what I really learned is that I needed to pursue something that kept me up at night. Steve Jobs has a famous quote that says, "People with passion change the world for the better." And I think I am finding that in the sustainability and energy space, but I will say it takes time, it takes patience, it takes exploration, and really it's a lifelong process to find that passion. So, I wouldn't focus on a field. I would focus more on what are you passionate about and how can you turn that into a career for yourself. And you may face a lot of hurdles along the way. For example, coming out of my college degree program, I was most suited to go into either academia or oil and gas. I pivoted over that hurdle, got over that hurdle, and now I'm working in a career that I find very meaningful. I think it's important for people to recognize that what they study or what field they pick in high school doesn't necessarily define them, and they should pursue their passion and figure out a way to make their passion their career. It makes it a lot easier to wake up every day and go to work.
It's like the quote about like you don't have to work a day in your life if you love your job. The passion
Exactly.
definitely. I like that quote about keeping you up at night. That's a very important thing, I think, too.
Yeah, sometimes it can be challenging too. You don't have to keep you up at night too much.
It'll take away your sleep. But
Exactly.
is there anything else you want to share with everyone? Because that was the last of my questions. So
Yeah, good question. Is there anything else I want to share?
it can be about your job, about where you are, where you want to go, just really anything that helps you get where you are.
No, I think for me, like I remember being in all of your shoes, and I still some days feel like I'm in those same shoes, trying to figure out, what it is that I want to work on, what it is that I want to commit myself to. And I think it's important to realize that it doesn't always make sense looking forward. You may try to look into the future, and you can only plan one step at a time. Um, so try not to get too bogged down in planning 10 steps ahead. Focus on that next step and see where it takes you. I'm in my current job because I took one step after my university, and I actually met someone during that job who invited me to come work with him at my current employer, RMI. And now when I look backwards on those steps that I took, they do all make sense. But as you're moving forward, sometimes it can be really confusing, it can be really challenging. Uh, it can cause you to have, almost an existential crisis. Like, what is it that I'm going to be doing in this world? And I think it's important to remember, take one step at a time. Don't try to think too far ahead. And it will make sense when you look backwards on it. So trust in the process and trust in the step that you're taking next.
Thank you so much. That sounds awesome. And thank you so much for doing this whole interview. That was great.
No, thank you. I very much enjoyed it, and I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully share something useful to all of you who are going through this challenge that I went through a while ago. But I think it's really important too to see it as an opportunity. It doesn't have to be a challenge. It's really a fun time, and it's supposed to be exciting. So, try to take your time with it and not put too much pressure on yourselves.
Thank you so much. And just personally, for me, this is very interesting because I'm actually taking environmental science right now. So, like a lot of the stuff that you're talking about with air pollution, that's actually the unit that we're in right now. So, we're learning about
Nice.
a lot of that. I took notes on it today, watched a lecture. It's just very funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. What are you interested in, and where are you thinking of going for your next step?
Right now I'm looking like so it's my junior year and I'm still kind of like feeling out where I want to go. I have like you were saying with you had multiple career paths. I have so many different ways that I'm like I could go here, I could go here. I do like the environmental science class I'm taking right now, so I think that's a definite possibility. But then there's also like business, this, that, and then I also want to play soccer in college, so that throws a whole other layer of confusion into the mixture. But honestly, I have to say this talk and some of the stuff you said really very calming, taking it one step at a time. Gonna relax, trust the process.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, I think, I also played sports in college, and I I found it not really challenging to balance the coursework and the sports, but I think it made me, it forced me to be very disciplined. It was like the only way you could get everything done, right? So that's really exciting. You're thinking about that. I think it's also great you're taking environmental science. Air pollution is a huge challenge globally, and a recent study actually just came out and said that it is responsible for 1 in 5 premature deaths in the world globally. So it's also becoming a silent health time bomb, as the World Health Organization calls it. Electric vehicles are a really great solution for that because they don't actually emit any exhaust from the tailpipe. Um, they still, depending on their power source, might have carbon emissions farther upstream, but they can do a lot to reduce urban air pollution. Uh, Also, redesigning cities around people instead of cars is a great way to reduce air pollution too. So, I hope you keep digging into this field. I personally find it very motivating and worth waking up for every day. And yeah, in the future, if you find that that's a path you go down, look up RMI in the future. It's a really fun place to work.
Thank you so much.
Um, and also, like one other point I would mention too is there's a really great Japanese concept called ikigai, Ikigai, and it
I'm gonna write
means
this down.
a reason for being. And it's about 4 parts. What are you good at? What do you love? What does the world need? And also, what can you get paid for? And there's a really great Venn diagram, which I'm sure you all are familiar with from high school days, that tries to overlay these 4 parameters into a system that you could use to think about what's important to you and what you might want to dedicate your life's work to. So I think for those who are interested, it's also very worth looking up and uh, kind of going through a self-reflection process for yourselves to figure out, what is your reason for being, what is your ikigai, and how can that inform your career choices too.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much too. And my best is Miss Coco helping you all with this?
Yeah.
Send her my best. I'm good friends with her son. It's hard to believe we've been at high school for over 10 years now. Um, but my best to all of you at Amity as well.
Thank you so much. And yeah, best of luck in wherever your career takes you.
Thanks. And let me know if you have any questions, or I'm always reachable on email and pretty quick to reply.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Cheers.